Post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, affects 3.5% of the population in the United States, equaling about 8 million Americans per year. And on the military side, not nearly enough studies have been conducted to get an accurate number, but we do know that before Operation Iraqi Freedom started, the number of cases were 5.03% out of 1,000 active duty members, and after Operation Iraqi Freedom started, it is 43.03% of cases in active duty members per 1,000 people. So that number has really skyrocketed for military members since the beginning of this war. You may be wondering, what exactly is PTSD? We hear this term a lot, but I'm not sure that we fully understand the effects and repercussions that come with it. Post-traumatic stress disorder is defined as a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, a terrorist attack, war, combat, rape, or other violent assaults. Today I want to inform you about ways that military members often struggle with PTSD, not because I think that military members are more important than other people who suffer from PTSD, but because both myself and my husband serve in the United States Air Force, and this is a topic that hits close to home in our hearts for our family. PTSD can take on many different forms for United States service members. Sometimes it can look like a dad that would rather sleep than play with his kids. Sometimes it looks like mom who would rather do anything than the hobbies that she used to adore before she left. Sometimes it looks like a parent that just came home and is now so anxious because they have to know when and where every single person they know is, because they care about them, want to make sure they're safe and control that situation. But for many other people, it takes a much darker turn. They begin drinking and substance abuse and taking frustrations out on others in violent ways. And many people then begin to try to hurt themselves. For a guy that I worked with in the Air Force, for the case of this speech, I'll refer to him as Webb. Webb went on many, many different deployments, and it all just started really adding up and taking a toll on him. On top of that, he began having issues at home and family issues, and that is one of the biggest triggers for PTSD in military members to begin, is family issues at home. On top of that, then he began to start drinking heavily to cope with everything else going on, and it got so bad to the case that people from the base were so worried about him, they called the cops and asked them to go provide a wellness check for him and make sure he was okay. And when the cops showed up, he showed up on his front porch with a gun to greet the cops, and was threatening himself and the cops there to check on him. And he ended up getting shot and dying right there on his front yard. I feel like for many people who watched that news story, they probably thought that either he was a crazy person or just really stupid, because the cop was going to shoot you if you acted like that. And I'm sure many people thought he deserved it, because those cops were just doing their job and coming to check on him and make sure he was all right. And then he freaked out like that. And the fact of the matter is, that is PTSD. PTSD is dark and it's ugly, it's disorderly and confusing for everyone that's caught in the crossfires of it. Many people struggling with PTSD may show signs and symptoms in many other ways, however. According to the American Addiction Center, symptoms can show up at any point right after the event or many years later. Symptoms may show up and then go away, or they may not show up at all, or show up and not go away. It's impossible to be able to predict those things, but there are ways to help prevent it from happening when you come home. If you know someone that raised their right hand, one of the 1% that said, "I will lay my life down on the line for you," I urge you to really pay attention and watch for symptoms such as depression and eating disorders and problems sleeping, problems with their memory, social problems, family problems, often marital problems, and big changes in parenting are one of the first ways that you could recognize a person may be developing PTSD in the military. For mothers, this was particularly a very strong point because they struggle with carrying their child and then going to leave them for a year and sometimes not getting to communicate with them throughout that whole year while someone else is raising their child. And once they come back into the picture, they have a lot of issues figuring out where they fit and if they're capable of taking care of their kid and if they even should, because they feel guilty for leaving them for that whole year. And this is a large area that women in the military find themselves getting PTSD. Just leaving your children alone for a year as a parent causes mental problems in itself. But then add in not being able to talk to them and someone else raising their kids, that makes it even harder. And that was the case for Major Terry Garola, who's the famous picture of her arms wrapped around her little daughter whenever she returned home from Iraq at the airport. She recalls having to leave her 2-year-old daughter for a year and not getting to talk to her before the days of FaceTime, and how her husband was so frustrated with having to do everything and they ended up getting a divorce, and how she was so scared that her daughter would forget her face and who she was. But she recalls in an interview by Laura Barnett about her famous picture returning home to her daughter Gabby at the airport. She says, "I was crying tears of joy for the fact that Gabby hadn't forgotten me. When I finally came up for air, I saw that every single person in the airport was crying too. Men, women, I kid you not. They were all just bawling. I had no idea the impact the photograph was going to have. I mean, wow. Even now, looking at the picture brings tears to my eyes. It shows the true emotion of what we military parents go through." About 45% of active duty military members are parents. And though they are proud to protect those that they love, PTSD will still show up and still needs to be addressed. But there is a bright side and hope. And if you find yourself or someone that you know struggling with PTSD, there are some awesome treatment methods that are being extremely proven to work. The first one is called trauma-informed care, where the focus is on trauma and it's person-centered. So it aims to improve wellness and functioning over treating symptoms of PTSD with medication. The second one is called prolonged exposure therapy, which lasts between 10 to 12 sessions for 90 minutes at a time, and it's more focused on maybe why you have PTSD more so. 3 is cognitive behavior therapy, which helps people understand why they think and react to things the way that they do, and it focuses on finding triggers to prevent issues from happening in the future. Many bases are also requiring members to take a class or seek guidance when they get home from being overseas, in hopes to prevent that PTSD from ever occurring by dealing with the situations firsthand when you first get home, which I think is a phenomenal idea, because any military member lost to such an awful disorder is one too many. PTSD can cause so many problems, but the more that we discuss it and strive to understand it and take care of our service members, the better that we can treat it and hopefully prevent it from happening at all at some point in the future.